Forex, it's a weird, weird world. You trade money for money to get more money. More specifically, you trade currency for a currency to end up with more currency. We'll get to the subtle nuance and details later. Let's start by looking at our Forex model. And I'm going to start over here because eventually we're probably going to use the whole board. Forex is modeled as a supply and demand graph, and as I glance at that, maybe we want to be a little larger. Good enough. It's a supply and demand graph, so we know we have coordinate plane. And on all supply and demand graphs, our y-axis will measure price and our x-axis will measure quantities. In this case, we're looking at trading currencies. We have the foreign exchange of currencies. We previously talked about the relationship between the United States and China, so let's stay there for right now, and we'll stay with what's most familiar. We're going to make this a market for the United States dollar, which means that on our x-axis, we can clearly indicate that this is a market for the United States dollar by simply labeling it quantity $sign. Notice that we don't write quantity money. If we wrote quantity money, that would be a money market, and money and currency are not mutually exclusive. While currency is part of money, is all parts of money currency? And the answer is no. Remember about M1. M1 includes currency, checking account deposits, and traveler's checks. And while traveler's checks are like rodents of unusually large size, frankly, I don't think they exist, checking account deposits are very real, and this doesn't really talk about it at all. This just talks about trading currencies. So make sure that you label it properly, because as soon as you write quantity money, you have ruined your graph and it doesn't make any sense. On the y-axis, we're measuring the price. And in a foreign exchange, the price of your currency is how many units of a different currency it takes to purchase 1 unit of your currency. So really, this is the market for a dollar. And on the y-axis, we will label the exchange rate, which is our price. What is the price of $1? The price of $1 is how many yuan renminbi it takes to purchase a dollar. So it's yuan per dollar. It's really important to stop and point out some formatting with this graph. Whatever your x-axis is labeled must be the denominator of your exchange rate, because it is the price per dollar, because this is a dollar market. And in this case, we're valuing dollars in terms of yuan renminbi. It could be exchanged with any currency in the world, but in this case, we have a specific. So we have our price as currency per currency, quantity of the specific currency you're looking at, making sure that our x-axis and our denominators are in agreement, and now we construct a supply and demand graph. We have our equilibrium exchange rate as ER. Could actually be Y for the yuan renminbi because we're pricing our single dollar in terms of that. And finally, we have our quantity here. Now let's talk about what these curves are made out of. If this was a market for hats, what would the supply be made out of? That's right, it would be made out of hats because you're selling hats. In this scenario, if we're selling dollars, the supply is made out of dollars. But is it every dollar in the entire world? And the answer is no. It is only dollars that want to be converted into yuan. I'm going to put a parenthetical next to our supply, and while it's not a formal part of the graph, I think this is essential in understanding the behavior of Forex markets. Why would a dollar want to become a yuan? Well, if I wanted to purchase something in China, would I need to convert my dollars into yuan in order to do that? And the answer is yes. If I wanted to buy a financial asset in China, would I need to convert my dollars into yuan in order to do that? And the answer is yes. And so dollars want to become yuan because of either behavior in the current account or behavior in the financial account. Demand. Who's buying dollars? Well, in this case, it's exclusively yuan holders. So the demand for dollars is made out of yuan that want to go to America. And there are two reasons that yuan want to go to America. They either want to buy goods and services made in America, the current account, or they want to buy financial assets in the United States. The financial account. And once we understand the behavior of these parentheticals, we'll really understand the nature of this graph as a whole. Right now I want to show you a reciprocal perspective. It's the exact same model of the world, but from the other point of view. So here we're going to do dollars over yuan, quantity yuan, these are yuan that want to go to America, these are dollars that want to go to China. Notice that the supply in the dollar market is the same as the demand in the yuan market, and vice versa. The demand in the dollar market is the supply of the yuan market. We'll come back to this idea a little bit later. Let's go back here and let's start talking about a scenario that might affect change of the value of your currency. Let's say that the United States is currently experiencing a recession. What monetary policy, open market operation might you suggest? Buy bonds? I like that idea quite a bit. So the Fed is going to buy bonds. And as the Fed buys bonds, OMO eats the bonds. And what's OMO spew into the world? Money. So the money supply is going to increase. So we've increased the money supply by buying bonds, thereby lowering the nominal interest rate. And when we lower the nominal interest rate, we've lowered the cost of borrowing, but we're not going to go any further than that right now. We do know that that is intended to increase aggregate demand by lowering the cost of borrowing. And what we previously learned is that as you lower the cost of borrowing, it's cheaper for households to borrow, therefore consumption will increase. You've lowered the cost of borrowing, making it cheaper to borrow, so firms will buy more capital stock. As C&I increase their components of AD shifts right, raising the price level and output, and we're rapidly approaching equilibrium. But what I care about in this scenario is less what the domestic monetary policy does, but this signal right here, this falling domestic interest rates. Now let's look at the market for a dollar. Based solely on the change of interest in the United States relative to the rest of the world, and ceteris paribus, we're keeping the interest rates in China constant. So you have a falling relative interest rate in the United States. As the interest rates fall in the United States, does that affect Chinese behavior in buying American goods and services? Remember, we're not talking about any change here. We're talking just about this signal. As the interest rate in the United States falls, does that affect Chinese behavior to go shopping in America? And the answer is it does. How? Well, it's not about buying goods and services. We're not talking about buying goods and services. What we're talking about is the profitability and return on investment of financial assets. And if the interest rate is falling, are American financial assets more attractive or less attractive to foreigners? The answer is less attractive. Why would you want to buy a financial asset that is going to return you less profit than relative to other financial assets? And so what we see as America's interest rate falls, the demand for the dollar in the financial account is going to decrease. As we've decreased demand for the dollar, we've also depreciated the dollar, meaning it now takes fewer yuan renminbi to buy a dollar than it used to. What does this look like over here? Well, over here what you see is the behavior that we've already identified as demand for the dollar, but representing supply of the yuan renminbi. Do as many yuan renminbi want to go to America as previous? And the answer is no. What we're talking about is less return on your financial investment. Therefore, the financial account effect on the supply of the yuan renminbi from a Chinese perspective is that they will decrease the supply, resulting in a greater quantity of dollars required to buy a single yuan renminbi. Notice that as the dollar depreciates, the yuan renminbi appreciates. It now takes more dollars to buy a yuan, and it takes fewer yuan to buy a dollar.